Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us for Intersections, whether you're in the room or whether you are online. We are thrilled to be back in Cedar Rapids. I'm Connie Ryan. I'm the Executive Director of Interfaith Alliance of Iowa, and I'm so glad to be with you today. And we are in a new location, at least for now, at least through December, at St. Paul's United Methodist Church. And we are so grateful to the church for filling in. First Presbyterian is doing some remodeling, I guess I would say, after some water damage. And so we were at the Episcopal Church last spring, and we are here for the fall and early winter, and then we'll see where things take us after December. But I'm glad that you found us. I'm glad that you are here. And I want to invite Pastor Jonathan to come up and give you a bit of welcome and maybe a little bit of instruction as well. Thank you.
Well, welcome to St. Paul's. My name is Reverend Jonathan Hefner. I'm the lead pastor here at St. Paul's, and it's a delight to be able to host you all for this event and for the upcoming events. Just a couple of hospitality and housekeeping notes. The first is restrooms are out. Well, you can go out either door, but they're just right over here. There's a water fountain there as well. We also have a team of volunteers that will tend to any needs you may have if you need some more water or coffee, anything like that. A special note, we have a Be Healthy, Be Green team here that takes composting very seriously, takes recycling very seriously. So we ask that you would compost and recycle appropriately. We have a table back here, and we've got folks who will help answer any questions if you're uncertain about all of that. With that being said, again, thank you for being with us here today. I'll give it back to you, Connie.
We're, as I said, very excited to be here and love the idea of churches being green. And so very happy to help in that regard, and thankful to St. Paul's for your hospitality. They created a whole team of folks to provide hospitality, which is awesome, and as did the folks at the Episcopal Church when we were there in the spring. So love hospitality of faith communities. Today, we are talking about disparities in employment, and we know that has always been an issue, but has become even a more important conversation, a more important topic to talk about. And so we're delighted to have Anthony Arrington, who is a certified diversity executive, certified diversity and belonging facilitator, and certified culture assessor. A native of Cedar Rapids, one of your own, he received his BA in communication studies from the University of Iowa. With over 25 years of leadership training and consulting experience across multiple industries, including a decade of combined recruiting and consulting experience, Anthony has been an advocate for diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. He has worked with organizations to motivate a change in culture through crucial facilitated dialogue and the desire to listen to understand. He skillfully uses facilitation, consulting, coaching, assessments, and storytelling to help organizations transform their thinking, understand the value of DEI and B, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and embrace their role as intentional drivers of this mindset throughout the fabric of their organization. You know Anthony as a leader in your own community, and I'm so grateful that Anthony is willing to give up his time today. And so if you will help me welcome Anthony Arrington. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay? Everybody hear me? Can you hear me back there? Online, everybody's good? Okay. First and foremost, I'm embarrassed, but kind of not, because I don't like PowerPoint slides anyway. You see that says career development. We're not talking about careers today. I do so many presentations, I literally just looked at that and said, I didn't even change the title. So we are talking about workforce disparities. So just wanted to fall on my own sword there. So again, thank you for coming. I appreciate the introduction. I am a native of Cedar Rapids, born and raised here. Actually, my kids went to preschool here at St. Paul, so I'm glad to be in this church. Both of my children went to preschool here, and I grew up in this neighborhood, so I've thrown a lot of rocks in the grass around here and had a lot of fun and played around in this neighborhood. So really always appreciate the opportunity to come back. So yeah, we're going to, a little bit about my company, Top Rank. So we are an executive search firm. We are unapologetic about our desire to focus on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. started my firm as a traditional recruiting firm and then evolved into more of a consulting and culture facilitation, because I don't believe you can work with companies and try to hire women or try to hire black people or try to hire military veterans or people with disabilities if you haven't created the culture to keep them. You can create a culture where they feel like they belong. So that's what we do. My partners who couldn't be here today, Nick Ford and Joy Briscoe, say hello. So first, let's level set. So when I thought about how do I present this, and I just told you earlier, I don't like slides, but I'm going to use them. So I said, you know, what do these folks know? What do we want to talk? What does workforce disparity mean? It means so many things to so many different people. But let's level set with some stats and how we connect the dots so we understand it, right? So according to the U.S. Census, we're projected to be a majority minority by 2045. So what does that mean? This country will be no longer majority white people, right? The first race and ethnicity breakdown of 2020 census show that this is the most diverse population ever. Think about that. For the first time, the portion of people who identified as white dipped below 60%. So it's about 57% right now. Okay? Under the age of 18, population under the age of 18, the majority of those folks are people of color. So what does all this mean, right? Let's look at our own backyard. Let's narrow this down. Let's zero into what's happening in our own backyard here in Iowa. Right? 4% of senior people in Iowa. Right? You got 4% of people of color in Iowa. But 21% of people 18 and under are people of color. So when we talked about earlier that the majority of the country, people under 18 are people of color, it's happening in our backyard as well. Right? We're not happening at the same rate, right? It's another stat. Between 2012 and 2017, right, Lynn County's population grew to about 62%. Right? 47% of that growth was from immigrants. 1 in 3 households headed by Black Iowans and 1 in 4 headed by Latinos. Think about that. Have incomes below the poverty level, right? So you combine all this, you think about the statistics, you think about the changing demographics, right? And you think about the way the world is changing, because this is a global society. We think about this as a United States thing, but the global society is changing, right? This is what it means. Oh my God, white people are disappearing. Oh my God, the world's coming to an end. All the white people are leaving. Right? That's the myth. That's the myth. That's the defense that pulls up. Because my skin color is different, or because I have a different culture, or because suddenly my culture or people that look like me may be increasing, suddenly there's this feeling that something's being taken from European white people. Oh my God, right? By the way, I love that movie, Back to the Future. This is the reality. That's boogeyman talk. That is absolute boogeyman talk. And what we need to be doing is talking to our neighbors and our friends and explaining that that's boogeyman talk. Because these issues and this boogeyman talk has a direct impact on workforce. There's a direct impact on everything. But since we're talking about workforce today, a direct impact on workforce. Okay? We like to believe that more diversity equals more good jobs, right? If we have more diversity, we'll have more good jobs, right? It's not always the case. Here's the unemployment rates. When you think about unemployment, it's historically been 2 to 3 times higher for people of color, even today, right now. These are numbers just from August. Black unemployment is at 4.5% compared to 2.4% for white people and 3.8% for Latinos. So nearly double. Those numbers look small until you look at relative numbers, right? So great, unemployment's low, but it's twice as high for people of color. And it always has been. So why is that, right? Average household income. Thank you for Greater Cedar Rapids Community Foundation for digging up some of this information. I'm a board member there, and it was easy for me to grab this. So I didn't have to go look for it because I knew intuitively, but I wanted to make sure I understood. Overall income, $88,000 in Lynn County, in this county alone. White people are at 92,000. Look where black people are. Why is that? We're certainly not dumber, certainly not less intelligent, but are we willing to address their issues of why? Right. We tend to talk a lot, and this is why we tend to talk in generalities, and we do a lot of surface level conversation, or we throw stats out, but we really don't dig under the onion to find out why. I'm a root cause analysis guy. Any of you all work in manufacturing before? You know, working or know people? You know, widgets, right? Things break down, you're a root cause analysis. What are the 5 whys? I try to apply that to human behavior all the time. Why? I was taught as a 2-3-year-old to ask questions why. Why as adults that we don't ask the questions why, right? We're told not to talk about it. No, don't talk about that at work. Don't talk about religion at work. Don't talk about your politics at work. There's only 24 hours in a day, right? If I work 8 to 10 of those hours, and if I get enough sleep, maybe 6 hours, there's 8 hours left in a 24-hour day. What do you expect me to do? How do I not bring myself to work? How do we not talk about these disparities? Because they're real, right? So let's dig into that. What are the real root issues? It can't be, well, we can't hire enough people of color. We can't find enough opportunities for people with disabilities because they're not here. We can't find them, right? There's always these, what I call surface level excuses, right? Surface level. But let's dig into the roots, right? Here's some root issues. And I would encourage you all. Discrimination in housing, criminal justice, and education. Why are we talking about that, Anthony? Why are we talking about those issues? They have nothing to do with workforce disparities. Well, actually, they do. They do. So redlining is a historical fact. Does everybody understand redlining? Folks online, and you raise your hand on push the online, raise your hand button. When you create redlining and when banks deny loans and create an area where certain people cannot afford housing, think of what that does to a person mentally, right? Forget the fact that they can't get the loan, right? But are you thinking about work when you don't have a place to eat and sleep, right? So you don't have a place to eat and sleep. The workforce disparities, or excuse me, the redlining's causing issues with your ability to find simply housing. And so every day you wake up, think about yourself when you wake up every morning. You brush your teeth, you get up, you take a bath, shower, whatever you do, right? And you have your own brush your teeth moments. That's a luxury, right? That's a privilege. When you just think if you didn't have that, what would you be worried about work? How you're performing at work, getting to a job? You're trying to figure out how to sleep at night. These dots connect. And so when you have a housing issue through redlining or other discriminatory practices, you create the mental trauma. You create the social trauma that impacts this person's performance, desire to get a job, want to get a job, or should I turn to crime to find a way to work, right? Which leads me to the second point. Here in Iowa, black people are 7 times more likely to be arrested for marijuana charges as white people. Yet they commit crimes at the same rate. All of you, who's been in the room, who has hired people, who is responsible for hiring people in your career, right? We all do background checks, most of us. Many companies do that, and they use background checks to make hiring decisions. I don't think that's fair, but that's another conversation. We don't have time today. But I say that because how does crime impact employment? Well, if I've got a criminal record now, this is very common sense. If I have a criminal record and I'm being judged on my ability to do a job and a background check is checking my criminal record, and I got caught with marijuana when I was 17 years old, but all these people that are European got caught with marijuana when they were 17 and they have jobs and I don't, that's a problem, right? This creates workforce disparity. If people that look like me or people that are of another ethnicity are being charged at 7 times the rate of white people, logic tells you, I do a little math, I got, that probably around 7 times harder to get a job, right? 7 times harder to make the same money. right? 7 times harder to be promoted, right? We understand compounding, right? We all understand compounding. 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8. We understand compounding. When you compound those decades or those months of challenges because of the criminal justice system, what does that do to your psyche? Forget the easy part. The easy part we just talked about. It's harder to get jobs when you have a criminal record. So if we're 7 times more likely to have a criminal record, it's going to be much more difficult for us to get a job, thus workforce disparity. But we also aren't thinking about the mental trauma that causes, right? The mental trauma on top of the fact that I just don't have a job. What is the trauma that causes? I don't know if anybody in this room or online has been in a position where you had to make a decision on whether you're going to pay a light bill or go without food. Because I smoked marijuana when I was 17, right? That's workforce disparity. These are root issues. The easy thing is to say we don't have enough people, or we have the statistics say that there's not enough people with disabilities in this community, or there's not enough black people, or there's not enough women, there's not enough men for the education space. But we have to ask the deeper questions. Why? Right? Islands of color have consistently been excluded from opportunities for prosperity, right? Which contributes to the economy. When you think about the pandemic, we watched in real time how workforce disparities were at play. When you looked at the number of layoffs and what types of positions were being laid off and who they were. I don't need to run through the statistics with you. I did not bring statistics. That's not the purpose of this meeting today, to talk about numbers all the time. Those are surface level issues. We already know there's a problem, so I shouldn't have to show you stats to tell you that. If you'd like me to, we can do that. But I'm talking about the why. Why are there workforce disparities? And we saw this on clear display during the pandemic, when the number of women and the number of African Americans and other people of color suffered tremendously through layoffs, tremendously through low pay and dangerous jobs, right, that they were working. So you compound that with what was already the case of workforce disparity because of the other reasons, and you have to ask yourself, wow, okay, what does that mean? What does that mean? Why is that the case? So lots of reasons, right? So, Anthony, what are we going to do about it? What can we do about it? This is where I want to hear from you as well. I have some thoughts, but this is not a silver bullet answer, because it takes a multi-pronged approach. But here are some general thoughts. Self-reflection. I like to call this brush your teeth moments, right? It all starts with each of you. And I know I'm what we may say preaching to the choir, right? I believe that you're all here for a purpose and for a reason. Nobody forced you to come. But you have friends, you have neighbors who don't think like you, who don't see like you. You belong to other clubs. So I would ask you to self-reflect on yourself. What can you do? I call this brush your teeth moments. Everybody has a moment by yourself. Whether you get up in the morning, you're brushing your teeth, that's my time. I look in the mirror, I talk to myself a lot. I do. I talk to myself a lot. Maybe it's in the shower for you. Maybe it's when you take a walk your pet, or when you're cooking or whatever. But everybody in this room has time to yourself. What do you think about during that time? Are you self-reflecting on this? What can I do to be a better human in this world? What can I do to be an advocacy for workforce disparity? If I am in a position of power, right? Brings me to my second one, your 3 Ps. Do you have power? Do you have a platform? And do you have privilege? I would argue that everybody in this room, myself included, we have privilege of some sort. I have privilege today. I have the privilege of talking to you. I have a skill that allows me to stand here and try to help impact change. This is my privilege and my platform, right? And so I'm trying to drive purpose through those, right? This is my power that I have. My question to you all is what power, platform, and privileges do you have? Many of you maybe have had great careers. Maybe you are in positions now where you are making decisions. You control hiring decisions. You control training. You control promotions, right? Are we making decisions with the lens in mind of workforce disparity and equity, right? So I would encourage you, these are, they may seem simple, but they could be difficult for some of us because we're not accustomed to confrontation and questioning, right? But if you have that power and you have that privilege, right, you have to be the answer, right? It's collective effort, right? Pushing for policy change. I believe Iowa officials, we have to focus on policy. We have to be politically aware. I don't like politics. Let me say that again. I don't like politics, but politics is a part of our life. I don't care what you do. I don't care where you are. I don't care what position you have, and I don't care what color you are. Politics either impacts you positively or it impacts you negatively. And we know that policies here in the state of Iowa have to change. So again, I'm asking, as you think about the 3 Ps that you have, do you have the power to affect Des Moines or to affect City Hall here in Cedar Rapids or your communities and where you live at? I was just on the phone I'm working with a county right now, and I was just at a meeting this morning, and we're talking about how to improve their culture in this county. It's an Iowa county. Not Iowa County, a county in the state of Iowa. And one of the conversations we were having revolved around disparity. So it was a great timing. And we talked about equity. We talked about policies, and we talked about wages. And the first question I ask is, what is within your control? Because it's always about this. When you're dealing with municipalities, it's always the state. I can't do this policy, this rule. Okay, that's fair enough. Who's lobbying for that? Who's working on those issues? Well, we're not real sure. You know, John's supposed to do this. Okay. So does it matter to you when you're in a position of power and privilege? This organization is in a position of power and privilege and decision making. They have opportunities to lobby for policy change, but they're not doing it. So is it important? It is important to them to look at the policies around pay. It is important to them to look at how do we lower the cost of goods in the state? What support systems do we have? This is one of them. Obviously, the interfaith is one support system that we can have to educate. But what do you do when you leave here, right? What do you do when you leave here? Who are you talking to when you leave here? What connections do you have in Des Moines? And this isn't, I think it's important that oftentimes when we talk about what can we all do to make change, it can be overburdening. It can be overwhelming. And because it's overwhelming sometimes, and because it may be difficult, or because Cousin Larry or Michelle at your church doesn't believe in this philosophy of workforce disparity, they believe that everybody pulls themselves up by them bootstraps, right? They believe everybody's treated equal. And so they don't believe that the disparities are because of systemic issues. They believe it's because of individuals. Do you believe that? Because if you don't believe that, what are you doing to help change those mindsets, right? So this is why I talk about self-reflection, using your power and platform and privilege. We can change policies if we do those 2 things. And all of that takes being intentional. That's hard. Being intentional, right? Every time you wake up. I imagine many of us maybe have been athletes in our lives, or we care about wellness. Maybe you wake up and you run every day. You wake up and you take a walk. Whatever you do, that becomes routine. It becomes a part of you, a part of your character. Being intentional should be part of your character. If you're in positions, every decision you make, if you continue to do it, like you practice, like you take walks every day to stay in shape, and like you do whatever other activities you do on a regular basis to be sharp, if you're intentional every day, it becomes natural. It doesn't become work. It just becomes a part of your character, right? And again, I know to some respects I could be preaching to the choir. Maybe many of you do this. Maybe many of you do this. So I'm not here to say that nobody does, but these are what I see through my lens. This is what I see as being effective to help with workforce disparity. So I'm going to stop there because I'm going to ask you a couple questions. But before I ask you questions, do you have any questions for me? Because those are the root causes, right? This is how you improve workforce disparity.
If you have questions, it is our habit in intersections that I bring the microphone to you. So just raise your hand and I will bring it to you so that everybody can hear. And then catch my eye and I'll know who I'm going to next as well. So who has questions for Anthony?
Thanks so much, Anthony.
Yeah.
I really appreciate your knowledge on this issue and your ability to speak so eloquently about it. I just had a couple of things. One is the root cause analysis. Is that what it was? One of the things that I find so interesting is that when there are that clutch the pearls thing about, oh, white people are not going to be the majority. I think that somewhere there is the knowledge that minorities are not treated fairly. And that if minorities become the majority, then white people will be treated the way minorities have been treated, which I don't believe is the reality.
Right.
But I think when people say, oh, why does it always have to be about race? And what is it? It's not always that. And that whole bootstrap thing, there is somewhere that knowledge,
Right.
that understanding that there is an unfairness. And I think a lot of people do not cop to that. So that's one of the things that people can be encouraged to do and encourage their friends to do, to cop to that knowledge that there is an unfairness, which may be very hard for some people. I, of course, have seen the realities myself, you know, but I still can be surprised. And
Yeah.
I saw this woman the other day who gave a talk, and she was white, and she was saying what can be done. And she said, when you teach your children, you see that person over there, you see that person of color, you need to treat that person just like everybody else.
Right.
And I'm thinking, well, what's wrong with that? Well, because you're othering the person already. You know, even if you're telling people
Right.
to be good to that person, you're othering them.
Yeah.
So these are like so many layers of awareness
Right.
and what you can do and intentionality
Yes.
that it is daunting, but that's the work that has to
It
be
is.
done.
I'm glad you brought that up. One of the things that when I work with clients, we talk a lot about intent versus impact, and this is how workforce disparity impacts, right? If I have a lived experience, let's say I'm a rural white guy, right? And I grew up in rural Iowa, and all I know about other people is through the news, right? Or all I hear about people of color or women or military veterans or LGBTQ, all I hear about is through the news, right? And so I've drawn a bias and an opinion, right? And now I'm a decision maker at work, right? And I make decisions on who to hire and who not. And I say, and my belief in rural Iowa is that you work hard, you get ahead, right? It's easy to blame that person and call them a racist. That's the easy thing to do, right? They're just a racist. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. But I try to think about intent versus impact and root cause. Where does that come from? Why do you think that way? Why do you think that just pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, when I can show you that that's not true? But tell me where that comes from. If you can understand somebody's lived experience, then we can have conversation about how to influence change, because you can't change other people, but you can influence through conversation. We don't have to agree, and maybe that person is a racist. We'll find that out through conversation. But we have to be willing to ask those questions, because it's the lack of digging, it's the lack of root cause analysis on humans and behavior that gets us into these situations where we're not making decisions that are for the benefit of all. And we end up putting ourselves in positions where we allow folks like that who have a lived experience that they never got to express to continue to make decisions that despair the workforce. So again, we can talk about all the other superficial issues, but we have to deal with the root.
I wanted to say, Anthony, do you think that you're grossly underestimating the problem? I mean, what I see in the legislature is an all-out attack on equity, diversity, and inclusion, and difficult to get help and assistance for the elderly, the disabled, the minorities, and all other groups, and attacks on immigrants. And that it's stemmed from nationwide doing this, and it's alive here in Iowa, and there's a whole underground of that going on, and a lot of people that I would call haters.
Sure. So to answer your question, if you're asking my personal opinion, 1,000% we're under attack. 1,000% we're under attack. I would ask, how do you all feel? Are there any thoughts about what you know about the legislation? What are your thoughts? Yes.
For example, one thing that bothers me is Ms. Byrd, is thinking, of putting in the Constitution or putting in a law that all governmental documents have to be in English only. To me, that is then exclusion. We're putting down anybody that doesn't speak English.
Right. How does that, again, we're talking workforce disparities. That's an easy answer to how that impacts.
Just
You
to
could-
clarify, it actually already is in law. It was passed in law under the Vilsack administration. What she wants to do is actually
Apply
enforce it.
Enforce it, right?
Yeah.
And so the question becomes, why? Right? Are we asking the question why? Is it because we're under attack? Is it because they're racist, or there's some underlying reason? But if we in this room, and online, if you are in a position of power, privilege, and you have a platform, these are the issues that you can help address. But you're absolutely right. We're, if you want my personal opinion, we are absolutely under attack. I mean, my personal livelihood's under attack. This is what I do for a living. But putting me aside, the concept is it's under attack. It's tough right now, but we're here, and I'm a big believer in power in numbers. I'm a big believer in power in numbers. And as long as we're living in the state together, we have to fight together. So.
Anthony, thank you for being here. So with what Art said and what Pamela said, at the state level, so much coming out of the legislature, I can't keep up with it. But is it true that DEI at the universities the funding has been cut?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I thought I read that somewhere. I mean, I can't believe the universities are free thinking.
I'm sorry, you were going to say something?
Sorry, I spent half my time at the
Yes.
legislature. So originally the bill was to cut funding. It did not actually
Yeah, it
cut
didn't
funding.
go
What they did was back down from that, and they put together a study group. There will be a report that comes out in December for the legislature. We fully believe
Right.
that we will see that legislation again
Yes.
as justification for gutting DEI at our institutions,
Yes.
not just our universities, but it's also our community colleges.
Yes, they're making every effort. And I apologize, misquote. They haven't cut the funding, and they're continuing to try. But what they've done is apply other laws. So for example, House File 802, HF 802, if you ever want to Google it up, is a file that I think that was put into law last year, maybe a year and a half ago. Essentially says in K through 12 institutions, for having conversations about Black history, and you as a white person in the room hear something that makes you feel uncomfortable, you have a legal right to make a complaint, right? So did anybody, who in the room knew about that law in Iowa? Right here in our state, right? The state where we led the charge on gay marriage. You know, we have an amazing history about our Underground Railroad system here. We do some great things in the state of Iowa. And my ask of you all is, how do we use our power, our platform, and our privilege to influence our neighbors, our friends, our relatives? Because I should have worn my vote shirt today. I know we have to vote. And I know that sounds easy, but we're seeing what power does. We're seeing what legislative power does when you mix that with cultural animosity. So Yes, there was a question back here, and then I've got a question over here.
But she who has the mic has the power.
There you go. Oh, yay. I didn't know you had the mic.
I have
You
the power.
go, girl.
I have the mic.
Yeah.
You serve me any day.
So, we've talked about what the legislature has done to, I'll say, cut us off at the knees. I would like to hope, I hope that we are creative, inventive, and smart enough for workarounds.
Yeah.
If they're not going to let us teach about systemic racism in the classroom, how can we educate our children outside the classroom? Now, I can think of one really terrific example, and we are lucky enough to have the Academy for Academic and Personal Success in
Yes.
Cedar Rapids, Iowa.
Yes.
A fine program that teaches a relatively small group of typically African-American and mixed-race children about their history. How can we broaden that to take in all of those other kids that don't have the opportunity for an academy program in the summer?
I'm glad that you asked. And so for those who don't know, the Academy for Scholastic and Personal Success is a program here. It's been around over 30 years, and it's focused on helping young Black, brown, and biracial kids understand their history through rigorous academic training. It's a stiff academic program that is year-round and picks up during the summer. I want to say Urban Dreams in Des Moines has or somebody's connected to the company, the guy that he got shot in Des Moines. His organization, I think, is similar. And Waterloo, they have a 1619 school in Waterloo, which is an educational program. So what is how do we expand that? It's very simple. Well, not very simple, but we know people with money, right? We know people with money, right? If that's your power, if that's your privilege, if that's your platform, how do we fund these organizations? Here's an example. And this is no disrespect, because I was a board member. I love Boys and Girls Club. My family benefited so much from Boys and Girls Club, so much. I respect them immensely. But why aren't they getting the support that an Academy for Scholastic and Personal Success gets, right? Why is that? We got to ask those questions. I don't know the answer. I mean, I have my own thoughts. But I would say that continue to support these organizations that are advocating for the social justice of people. If you have an opportunity to put your money or your time, your sweat equity into those organizations, please do it, because they're here. They just don't have the resources to expand and scale. So that would be my first answer. You just write some checks, but go beyond the check. And I want to make sure I'm tying this. You have to understand all of this connects the dots to the disparities in the workforce. Because if I don't have a good education and I don't understand my history and I'm traumatized about the way I'm treated as a child, and that continues with me through high school, God forbid I go to college, these things affect my ability to perform at work. They affect who hires me, who thinks of me. I can still remember not being hired because I had dreadlocks in my hair. I was going to call my uncle and sue a company here in town when I was 22 years old. I know why I didn't get hired that day. I didn't understand it then. I wish I would have listened to him more. I didn't understand it then, but it happened. This is my Uncle Diedrich Doolin, president of NAACP. Sorry about that. But my point is, we continue to educate. The more we educate, the more we talk, the more we know, right? Yeah. Wait, I forgot Melissa.
That's okay. That's all right. So I have two things to address. The first was, is this really happening in academia? And I've been in academia about 20 years. I'm a social worker, assistant professor of social work practice. It's happening everywhere. We're being peeled back. There's colleagues of mine that have lost their jobs in DEI specific programming. It's not so much funding, but redistributive of funds, so that we're not, focusing. And a lot of what I'm encountering is professors, colleagues, our profession is dominated by white women, liberal, democratic women who think they're doing the right thing, and when held accountable, fold. Centering anti-racism, centering multiculturalism, centering anti-oppression is tremendously difficult right now. People are afraid to stand up. They're afraid to say something for fear of losing their jobs. I'm on job 4 since I left Ohio. I'm from Cleveland. Job 4. Because continuing to, I don't even know what I'm doing. I'm confronting everything all the time and getting a lot of backlash. What I'm noticing is that people are just unwilling to change. They're afraid. I'm doing it right now. I'm getting ready to have a panel discussion on coalition building at this university that I'm at, and to get people willing to reach out to our community, to invite people to come to this. I keep being told, you need to stop centering everything on this topic. We have so many other topics. And I say, no, this is the #1 topic in the nation and in social work. Number 2, what do? Libby? So to address your point, let's go back to Freedom Summer, right? Voting Rights Act of 1965. What did they do? You know, Mississippi was just absolutely entrenched in brutality for, you know, African Americans wanting to vote. It took the whole nation coming down there and a lot of brutality that happens, right? But they had to build anew because the systems are toxic. They're extremely toxic. And sometimes we have to build alongside before those institutions are willing to change.
Yeah.
I'll be back.
So I think important points, and again, if you hear the words coalition, you hear power in numbers, you hear people, and again, I'm going to go back to my very root, and that is, what are you as individuals going to do? Because and that doesn't mean that the burden's on you; it's collectively on all of us. But we all have to play our little part, and so that's important, because that's how they made change in the '60s.
It seemed to me
And
that
I've got you over there. Yep.
one of the reasons that we wanted to have primaries in Iowa first is that we could help create platforms and influence what are on those political platforms. To me, one of the problems today is we see nothing about platforms.
Right.
You know, it's just what we're going to do that, and the people they're not going against Biden now. They're going against each other.
Right.
But they're talking about Biden, which is crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what anybody's political beliefs here. I'm certainly not here to influence anybody's political beliefs, but these are real conversations, and we have to have them. We're not having conversations in the country, and again, I say this with 1,000%. It influences change. It influences workforce, but we're not having conversations about platform and policy. We're having conversations about culture and why I don't like certain human beings, and that's really disturbing.
I
Yes, and then-
wanted to reiterate that you do need to fear what the legislature will do again. I'm talking about that particular bill with the equity, diversity, and inclusion. It created a study, but it came out of a meeting in an education budget subcommittee for the universities and others, and they actually called the university presidents and other representatives of universities in to, I don't know what you would call it, an inquisition, what they're doing with this funds and the money and so on, and threatening to cut their funds, but they don't provide this. And that was somehow the moderates in the group on the floor were able to get it into a study, but there's an intent among some rabid Republican legislators to end that.
Right. So the thing that we do is you have to, if you don't believe in what your legislators are doing, you have to be a part of the process to vote them in or out. I don't care what letter's behind. There was someone back here.
Just real quickly,
Okay.
on to Libby's point, I used to belong to a group called the Thursday Night Group, and because we met on Thursday nights, and we used to, if you had like 10 people that you could have in your living room, and we discussed nuclear issues. You know, we were anti-nuke, but we did not come as anti-nuke. We came to facilitate discussion around nuclear issues. I believe that if we did a similar thing, where if somebody had like 10 people who could come to their living room, and we had a cadre of people who could come and discuss certain historical movements, times, issues, et cetera, we could do this we were volunteers. We could do this on a volunteer basis. Yes, support the organizations, but there is something that could be done without money. That's what's called like in-kind services. We could just come together and do like a training for people to be able to facilitate these things and then go out into the community and we did it age appropriately. There were, if there were adults or high school students, we talked about nuclear war, et cetera, et cetera. We talked to kindergarten kids. We talked about conflict resolution. What can we do besides having fight? This could be on all kinds of levels, et cetera, et cetera. The other thing about forming coalitions, I have this letter in my head that I have not written, white people beware. As long as they think they're only after us, then it's a thing they can kind of put aside. But they have decimated the public schools with these things. They have decimated the ability to monitor what age children are working. They've made it so that kids can, like dispense alcohol without being old enough to drink. So they're not only after our kids, they're after white people's kids too. And they will not be able to be suited even for the jobs that there are available to them, except to be in these places where they're in danger. And
This work impacts everybody.
It does. So if people understand this, they will maybe get on board.
Yeah. So like the idea, and this is very simple. Like I said, I'm not the smartest person in the room. There's lots of ideas in here, and that's a very simple idea. 10 people in a room. People, I mean, $50 and some pizza will get some people to a house, and just have a conversation. I think those are great ideas. Yeah, sorry about that.
Oh, you're totally fine.
Hey.
There are a lot of people in this room who know that you really should never give me a microphone. But, so my name's Renee Snyder. I am going to start with just a couple ideas and then lead back to your subject matter, which is actually what drew me here in the first place. The first thing is, I think what has happened is the conservatives are incredible at messaging, and not just incredible at messaging, but then having Democrats, the rest of us, like literally, like it marinates, and eventually we're using their language. And the first term that comes to mind is this woke idea, right? Which we knew began in the African American community and this kind of thing. Eventually we recognize, oh, this is the term that they're using. And little by little, we're hearing progressives use that language to describe things. And we literally need to use our brains to fight using their language. The same thing happened with cancel culture. Cancel culture was the Republicans said, a Democratic thing. They're canceling everyone. Now, and these are the people who canceled beer, right? Who took race out of racism in Florida. And now I'm hearing so many progressives talk about them being canceled. We need to be smarter than that and find other ways to describe what's going on socially than to take on that language. That's the reason why these political races are so close, because people have a language that the Republicans started that they can use without having to do the hard work of coming up with their own language to describe what in fact is happening in this country. And I think that is what is dangerously going to not just subvert what's happening with African Americans, but with democracy, okay, in this country. So that was my first issue. The second one had to do with, I tried to write these down. Let's see, I'll skip that. Race, we did that. I'm gonna go straight to what brought me here in the first place. Disparity in employment. So I am on the grace end of having been a judge who was fired, sued the state, won, and I am back on the bench. Now, the reason I come to do that is because,
You're on the bench now, right?
yes, I am.
Awesome.
In fact, I took the rest of the day off just to be here.
Thank you.
Okay. And the cool thing is I refused to sign anything that prevented me from speaking about it. I would have rather been fired and stay fired than sign anything that says I can't speak about it. I think that the courage that it takes, and I do walk in the hope that what I am doing is instilling courage in folks when I speak about it, is to explain how during that entire process, I did not do it in shame in one bit, right? Of course, it was a 5-year journey for me. Dear Libby was the first to get me to come out and speak about it publicly. And after it was all in the paper. But my point is that, well, as you said, one of the things that I realized is being back, that folks that missed out on having a Black and African-American woman as their judge lost out in those 5 years.
Yeah.
That's what they took away.
Yeah.
They took away the fact that they knew I was not going to do it their way.
Right.
Okay. With all due respect, the judge who ultimately decided my case was a judge appointed by our governor, okay, and was a woman. And I believe, and I know that she exercised a great deal of courage in going outside of what was expected.
Mhm.
That shocked me. Basically, I got fired for a spelling error. So they thought they would get away with that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was a spelling bee champion in school. That actually embarrassed me more than anything else. I didn't want my grade school teacher to see I got fired for a spelling error. However, everyone knew I was on law review in law school. I promise you I could spell. But my big issue is that I also realize now that one of the answers to the question is coming out, being very public about that, giving new language and new perspective on this. Often, one of the things I do find is oftentimes we talk about folks in prisons, and that is a problem. We talk about the most disadvantaged of us amongst, but like you, I know privilege, right? Mm-hmm. My children know privilege, but privilege doesn't take you out of the realm of being treated regardless of where you are in the society. And I do believe my coming out and saying this to you and speaking to you and being vulnerable to you is how we're going to change it. So anyway.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And I think that's so I want to address two things. One, I'll probably challenge you a little bit, or maybe you were saying the same thing and I misunderstood it, but then I'm going to concur. When we talk about language, you know, and the certain language, when we think about, and we'll use the word woke, right? That language is created by us, right? What the right is really good at, they're masters at messaging and hijacking words and creating negative connotations and pounding it every day on the radio, every day on the TV, every day. It's not about policy. We were talking about that earlier. It's not about policy. It's about a culture war, and they're very good at that. So they stole the word woke, and it became this negativity, right? So we say we shouldn't use that. Then it was CRT, right? Then it was critical, or excuse me, it was CRT first, I think.
Right, yeah.
And then it was critical race theory, right? Without conversation, that doesn't even get taught in K through 12. It's not even legal, first of all. Right. But again, take the word, hijack it, create it as a negative thing to scare boogeyman white people, and pound it. Messaging. Marketing is a beautiful thing, and it can be used for evil. It can be used for evil. We've seen people in the world do that. And I'm not saying you can call this evil or not. I'm not calling this evil, but I'm saying it's being used for something negative, right? And so we moved away from woke, and now the very simple acronym DEI is now the new boogeyman, right? So now we're hijacking that word, and we've got conversations and we're having these. Should we or should we not use those words, right? If I don't use those words, am I giving in? I don't know the answer to that. I think we're still in that nuances. But the point, to your second point, and this is what I was saying earlier, that self-reflection and that coming out If you think about history, if you believe history and you understand the civil rights era in the 60s and you understand Reconstruction, this didn't happen with just black people. It didn't happen with just Asian people. It happened with everybody, and there were freedom riders and people who took risks. I'm not asking anybody in this room or anybody online to give up your life. I don't know what risk means to you. It may mean something different to you than it does to you, than it does to you. My point is, risk is part of this process. And are we willing to take it? That's a risk.
Yes.
Are you willing to take a risk? 4 jobs in a year and a half. Are you willing to take a risk? Is Uncle Jimmy going to come to your Christmas party anymore because of how you feel? Are you going to lose friends at the club? These are the real conversations, because all of this impacts workforce disparity, because all those people that we're avoiding, they make the hiring decisions. They determine the policies about the raises, right? And all of that impacts the workplace. So we have to deal with the root. And I hope that the conversations today helps motivate and helps put perspective to that. So the one question I have for you is, show of hands, is who in this room is going to take their power, platform, and privilege and try to do something different?
That's
Right? So now we're in a church now. You can't be in a church. You can't be talking to the man upstairs and not being true. So I'm sorry, but the Lord saw y'all raise your hands up in here. So. In all honesty, I just hope that you understand that this isn't a game of statistics. The statistics have been out for decades. This isn't a game of numbers. We already know the numbers are bad. I don't need to tell you the numbers are bad. This is a game of action, and this is a game of mindset. And if we're not willing to address those things, nothing we do matters. No training, no policy, no change, right?
The last question is
so-
a moment of risk, and it's from your uncle.
Yes.
So relationships are very important.
Yes.
St. Paul's has had a relationship to look at addressing some of these cultural issues for years. Art State, I met him years ago, developed a relationship, and through that relationship, so I went to a workshop where there were 2 presenters, and it was on this subject, and one was white and one was black. The white guy did not believe that the black guy, who he had been working with for 10 years, was having the experience when they went to, so they were staying in a hotel room, and they went to the grocery store, and the white guy went through, and he only asked he was only asked for one kind of ID.
Mm-hmm.
The black guy went to go through, and the white guy was standing there and he watched it, and he, who did not believe what the black guy had told him, the black guy was asked for 3 kinds of ID to buy groceries.
You saw it in real time.
He saw it in real time. So some of what we see and some of what we experience, sometimes we have to get outside of our own comfort zone.
Absolutely.
You know, you have to meet with people. You have to meet and greet with people. You know, as you said, you know, there's a lot of effort to confuse and complicate things.
Yeah.
And you know, if people are honest, originally white women did not have the right to vote.
No.
Let's understand that. Blacks got the right to vote before white women. You didn't know that?
Yes.
Black men got the right to vote before women did.
Yeah.
Women haven't always had the right to vote. So, you know, unfortunately, there's still a lot of sexism in this country. I'm sorry. It still exists. But we have to stand up. And you have to, if you really want to get to understand what's really going on, get outside your comfort zone.
Get outside.
Talk to some people, establish a relationship.
Yeah.
If I didn't have a relationship where I'd stay, I wouldn't have been able to approach him about some of the things I was approaching him about. But he was comfortable.
Right.
St. Paul's has a history. I know when Mount Zion Church got flooded, it came and was able to have services at St. Paul's for a while.
Yeah.
So we need you to be committed to challenge this problem, and don't get caught up in the verbiage of what people were trying to do, and that's confuse you, because there is a race problem. Now, what the problem is in this country is, see, a lot of people don't realize when you get outside of the United States, things don't look the same.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a lot of big companies realize you got to have some people that look like some of the people who can talk to some of the people
Yeah.
outside of the United States.
Yes.
And so, you know, and what happens is, you know, in Iowa, we've been limited because of the numbers, but the numbers are changing. But also in the United States, we've been limited. And we need to understand you can make a difference.
Yeah.
One person, I've been told for years, you know, when it comes to what happened with Hitler, one vote made the difference. And you standing up might make the difference.
Absolutely.
So build those relationships.
Absolutely, relationship. Thank you, Aunt. So, real quick before we end, were there any questions online? Because I want to make sure the folks online, if you want to send those questions to me, if there's anybody that has questions that.
We don't have any.
Okay.
Kristen checks those. So
Okay,
anyway,
okay.
yeah. Do you
Good
have any
deal.
last words or?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you, Aunt. Now you know where I get my activism from. This matters. This work matters. And I think if there's one thing that you take out of here, you all raise your hand to do it. And it goes back to relationships as well, is what are you going to do with the information or the encouragement that you receive? Because the easy answer to workforce development or workforce disparities is people are going to tell you we just need to hire more women. We just need to hire more black people. That's not the answer. It's an and. That's a must. That's the easy part, right? But how are you going to get people to build a culture? Or how are you going to make change? And that comes from each individual doing our little part, using your voice and your power and your platform and your privilege to drive purpose. So with that, I'll leave you. If you have any questions, you've got my contact information. You can share it. I'm an open book. If there's things that you want to talk about, if you have organizations that you'd like me to come and speak with and work with, I do this for a living from the time I wake up to the time I go to bed, except a little music production in between. So.
Help me to thank
Thank
Anthony,
you.
please. So appreciate you spending time with us and providing the opportunity for conversation and all your expertise.
Thank you.
And thank you, everybody, for the really engaging conversation. It has been awesome. I want to remind you of what Pastor Jonathan said about they take composting and recycling seriously. And so the station is over there, and we do ask you to pick up your stuff and to do that. And there's a couple of volunteers that will help you with that as well. I think her name is Bonnie that was sitting here. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
She had to leave early, but
Okay.
she said if anybody is interested in doing that local granule type conversation, to let her know, you can do that through us if you're just interested, and we'll connect you, or if you know her directly, to get in touch with her. So she was interested in continuing the conversation. Thank you so much for being part of Intersections. Next month, we will be here October 6th. We always meet on the first Friday of the month, and we are delighted and excited to bring our national president to you, to Cedar Rapids,
Right.
and
That's history,
Reverend
man.
Paul
Thanks for sharing
Rauschenbusch.
that. Yeah.
And he is going to talk about
Yeah.
Christian
Okay.
nationalism, which is very connected to all of the conversation we had today. So please return, make your reservations, and we will see you in October. Thank you so much.
Y'all lucky I wasn't talking smack.
What do they call it?
That-
A hot mic?
A hot mic. Y'all lucky I didn't say nothing smart. Yeah.
Hot mic.
That's too funny.